Hello, Milwaukee Bucks fans. Welcome back to another episode of Bucks Latest presented by Fan Arch. As always, I'm your host, Dean Simon. And before we get into everything, please make sure to leave a like, leave a comment down below, and also subscribe. We're still very much on the road to 1,000 subscribers. So if you could hit that big red button down below, I would really, really appreciate it. Also, turn on post notifications so you don't miss future episodes and you stay up to date with the latest Milwaukee Bucks updates. Okay, first segment today, it's going to be something that we've kind of conversed about in previous episodes and all throughout the summer, essentially. With even while the Bucks were making their different changes to the roster and figuring out which pieces fit where, there was always the constant really of, will Kyle Kuzma eventually come back to his former self, or at least try and get back to what he was as a contributing member of the 2020 Lakers championship team, where he was a fantastic role player and much needed, very, very reliable role player on that run in the bubble to get the Lakers their 17th title. And I feel like it's kind of hard to believe for a lot of people to think that while the end result of his short half season tenure and 5-game playoff run with the Milwaukee Bucks, this first introduction to Kyle Kuzma, it's been overwhelmingly negative, but it is hard to remember that he actually had a better portion of the year, at least from an efficiency standpoint and, sort of just an activity standpoint, as a member of the Milwaukee Bucks than he did through the first half or you know, 3/5 essentially of the season with the Washington Wizards. And again, this is just going by percentages, mainly just field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, that he actually did improve. Of course, the playoffs told a complete other story, and that's where you'd like to see him actually make improvements to his box score figures and just his willingness to compete on both ends of the floor. So going into this next year, there's going to be obviously a lot of question marks surrounding Kyle Kuzma. And Sports Illustrated's Ryan Stano, he wrote an article that was basically three burning questions that will revolve around the Bucks throughout the course of this coming year. And the first one was, will Giannis be happy or continue to be happy playing in Milwaukee? And that's something that, of course, we'll see sort of evolve over the course of this year and the next 2-3 years. And will Miles Turner fit within the system, and how will he be in his debut year? And that's also a topic that we've covered pretty heavily on this channel. But Kyle Kuzma, the question, he was the third question, or the subject of the third question, and it was, will the Bucks get anything out of Kyle Kuzma? And again, this is not something that's new information or a new question that's been posed, like, will Kyle Kuzma be successful for the Bucks? But I think one thing going into this next year that some people might not have much hope for him, but I feel like a factor that could play into him improving drastically going to this year is the Bucks' decision to not start him. Kyle Kuzma certainly should not start for this team, and we've kind of come to that conclusion over the course of the final stretch of last season and the playoffs. But starting him off on the bench and maybe having him get into a little bit more of a rhythm as the Bucks' seventh or eighth man, it could eventually be very beneficial for his game, because when he was with the Lakers and was a reliable role player, he was not starting. He would play in 65 to 70 games in a year for the Lakers, and especially in that 2019-20 season, I believe he played 70 games, and 61 of those 70 he was coming off the bench and started 9. And of course, that was the year where, though the box score might not have said it, he was the most impactful version of himself. So starting him out from the bench going into this year and not having it be a repeat of last year, where he's immediately introduced as the Bucks' newest starting small forward because he's their new trade piece and he's going to be the third scorer. Now that those expectations aren't there, you could just roll with him on the bench to start things out, and hopefully that helps him get into a little bit more of a rhythm. So will Kyle Kuzma make real contributions to this team? Remains to be seen, but I think coming off the bench consistently will be able to help him develop some sort of a rhythm. All right, moving forward, Brew Hoops, Finley Cool, and Jack Trahern, they both took part in a combined article where they were ranking the Bucks' best prospects, or guys that they're kind of looking forward to seeing develop in the coming years. And the subject of these lists, they basically both did a top 5. And in those top fives, I don't have the exact order, but both of these guys placed Bogalu Markovic as their number one prospect for the Bucks going forward, which is, as you can tell from the segments, we'll get into Bogey a little bit later. But the fact that they both had Bogey number one in both of their lists was a little bit of a shock to me. But what was even more of a shock is that Jack Trahern specifically had Tyler Smith as the second ranked prospect over Andre Jackson Jr., over Chris Livingston, and over Mark Sears. Those are the other three guys that rounded out, I think, both of these guys' top fives. I'm pretty sure. And that was just a shock to me, going off of summer league, though of course I cannot continue to hold that over Tyler Smith's head because I know that he's much more skilled and polished than his percentages from the summer league would tell you. But I was just a little bit surprised that even in this kind of list or ranking, that Tyler Smith was at least 2, 3 leaps ahead of guys like Chris Livingston, who had a heck of a summer league and really did prove himself to a degree in the G League this past year, and had several amazing games of scoring 30, 35 plus points and just looking unstoppable out there. But that's not to say he doesn't have his obvious weaknesses as well. But Jack Trahern explained his choice of having Tyler Smith as his second pick, and he said, and I quote, "Despite showing very little in his first season, I placed Tyler second, mostly because I have lost a lot of faith in Ajax and have always struggled to see it with Chris. Ultimately, this ranking comes down to my belief that Smith now has a greater chance of being playable on both ends than Jackson or Livingston do." And this really just kind of it's all about Tyler Smith's shooting ability and the potential for him to get on the court simply because he has the potential to be a shooter, and he obviously has more of a chance to get on the court than Ajax or Chris Livingston for both of these reasons. But he then goes into the fact that he is more or less defensively inept, or just that he doesn't, in my view, he doesn't apply himself on that end of the floor as much as he should, because he does have these amazing physical traits that you see with a lot of guys in the NBA, and especially a lot of young guys, that they have these amazing physical traits but they just don't apply themselves in the right ways, or they just don't use them correctly on the other end of the floor. And I feel like that's exactly what it is with Tyler Smith. And he obviously, I know I've said the word potential maybe 17 times so far, but he has potential to be a fantastic two-way player. But I just feel like he hasn't put it together yet to the degree that a guy like Chris Livingston has, where, like, he says, Jack Trahern in this article, he says that he just doesn't really see it in the same way for Chris Livingston that he does for Tyler Smith, but I would beg to differ. I would think the opposite. I think that Chris Livingston has the more NBA ready game, to where if you needed Chris Livingston in a do or die game to come in as your 10th man or ninth man in a playoff setting and a just be a body out on the floor in a playoff game, I feel like Chris Livingston is more in a position to do so than Tyler Smith is. But that's just my opinion. That's just my piece. But now we're going to get into the guy that was ranked number one on both of these guys' lists, and that's Bogey Markovic. And now this article that I'm going to cover comes from Fanside. It's Dalton Sell talking about Bogey, and it kind of just it really does piggyback, not really specifically off of the previous article, but just talking about how the Bucks have really been interested in Markovich for a long time, and that he's obviously someone that they view as a valuable talent and someone that they should really keep tabs on and have develop in front of their eyes to eventually he'll earn a shot to get on the G League roster and ultimately try and become one of the stars of the G League team and then get on the NBA roster eventually. But he is a project, obviously, and that may be attractive to the Bucks front office and the coaching staff, because this window with Giannis, and I don't want to say nobody else because this is a very deep team, but Giannis, it's a very top heavy roster, obviously, with just Giannis being the best player on your team, and then the next best player is Miles Turner. But maybe this is the best way to view it, as as him being very valuable because he's a project, because no one really knows how long this Giannis era will last. Because it seems as though he could just up and leave at any moment, and it'll not necessarily be justified, but it's like you can understand it. So maybe they're thinking, you know what, it maybe we will have Giannis for the next 2, 3 years, and even if he does eventually end up leaving, hopefully by the time that is getting set to leave, we have Bogey to come in and obviously not replace Giannis, but to offer some kind of hope for this team going into the future. But fan side, it's Dalton Sell. He echoed this point and said that the Milwaukee Bucks clearly view Markovich as a long-term prospect. They've had their eye on him for a while now, and that as they reportedly worked him out prior to the 2024 draft, he's someone they think can grow into a legitimate NBA player. Yet, at his age, it's going to take time. As much as Markovich is set on making the NBA, it will take time before he's ready to hit the hardwood consistently. And of course, he's going to be going back overseas this year, and that wasn't any kind of new information. But I feel like he still does have a long way to go in his development. Maybe this is just me um, saying this kind of point or having this kind of view, but watching him in the summer league, at least from uh, not necessarily an athleticism standpoint, but from a coordination standpoint, I feel like he just could not keep up, especially on the defensive end, if he wasn't right at the basket. And even then, he didn't really offer much resistance as a shot blocker or any kind of rim to turn. And on the perimeter guarding guards, he could not keep up. And sure, guys like Dalton Sell and other writers will say that he does process the game very quickly, and he does have a lot of natural gifts. He's a naturally gifted playmaker, especially for his size, and he really does process the game quickly. But I feel like his coordination in a lot of aspects, especially guarding out on the perimeter, in any facet, he's gonna have to improve. He's gonna have to improve his lateral quickness and things like that if he really wants to make the NBA roster at any point and be a rotational piece that could help the Bucks win. And that's just my view of it, but we still have a long way to go anyway with his development, and we are very far from what he's actually going to be. So, obviously I do have faith in him. He does have a lot of natural skills, but he's really going to have to develop them going into next year overseas and the next couple of years. But the final thing that I'll be covering today is that another NBA writer from the fan-sided Swoosh Shrestha pointed out that the Milwaukee Bucks this offseason, and this is something that I kind of realized myself, not to toot my own horn or anything, but the Milwaukee Bucks did do a great job relative to their situation to build a pretty great team in terms of depth and add a bunch of guys that can wear different hats and great 3-point shooting and guys that are at least, oh, I don't know why my TV just turned on, but guys that are at least competitive on that end of the floor. And this isn't something that's new to me, that the Bucks are taking after both the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Indiana Pacers, two teams that made the NBA Finals this year. They're taking after both of those teams in terms of roster construction and being able to build deep teams of guys that can both somewhat, if anything, shoot the ball and guard. And that's really been the entire uh, kind of format that the Bucks have been following, especially with bringing back GTJ and Torian Prince and Ryan Rollins, who shot over 40% from three. So uh, Swoosh Shrestha, exaggerates that depth and the way that the Bucks are going about it, and the Thunder are going about it, and the Pacers are going about it. It's the direction that the NBA is heading in, and it seems like all of these different franchises have realized this. Of course, the Bucks maybe are a little bit later to the party, but that's the direction that they're obviously moving in now, as they don't really have any other choice. And the quote from the article itself was, as we have seen repeatedly over the last few seasons, the recipe for deep postseason success may now be a deep roster rather than a top heavy one with multiple stars. This last postseason was the clearest example yet, as both the Thunder and Pacers had extremely deep rosters, while some of the league's top heavy rosters, the Suns, the Lakers, the Bucks, and the 76ers, had early exits or even missed the playoffs entirely. So the Bucks' efforts of getting back their core guys and adding guys like Cole Anthony and having some newer guys come in like Amir Coffey, who's still fighting for that spot in training camp. They did add very serviceable pieces around Giannis and, around the guys that have been there before in Giannis and Bobby Porter. And you can say Miles Turner because he now has an NBA finals under his belt. Um, they do have a deeper roster than the rest of the league realizes. And I feel like this is going to come out and be more evident as the season goes on. But it's very clear to see that this team is taking after the Thunder and the Pacers, or at least they're trying to do it in the best way or the best fashion that they can. And it's really going to show in this next season. But anyways, that'll be it for me today. Thank you very much for tuning into another episode of Bucks Latest presented by FanArch. And before you go, please leave a like, leave a comment down below, and also subscribe. Still trying to reach that 1,000 subscriber milestone, and that would mean so much. So I appreciate it if you guys have already hit that button, and if a few more of you can hit that down below, I would appreciate it. Also, turn on post notifications so you don't miss future episodes. All right, I will be back again with another one soon, and I will see you guys in the next one. Go Bucks.